All right, let's get it going. Today we have the founder of the Southern Heritage Classic Cultural Celebration, Mr. Fred Jones Jr. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Welcome to the live podcast. Should I call you Fred or Mr. Jones?
All my friends call me Fred.
Are your friends? Am I a friend? Look, I'm trying to be a friend. Yeah. Well, Fred, let's start from the beginning because I know your roots are deeply planted here in Memphis, Tennessee. Tell us exactly what part of Memphis you're from.
From South Memphis, from near the Cleaborn Homes, where Alonzo Locke School was, park there, L.E. Brown Park. The pool is still there, but I remember we used to play baseball in the park across the bayou from the pool. I did something that probably will never happen again. I walked to school for 12 years.
You walked to school?
I walked to school from the 1st grade to the 12th grade.
Wow.
From Alonzo Locke Elementary to Porter Junior High to D. Booker T. Washington High School.
Okay, Booker T. Washington.
And I have to say, our motto was, we are tops, we lead and others follow. And to this day, we all believe that.
Yes.
You know, and so that was the beginning. You know, that's when I had my paper route in the Cleaborn Homes, press seminar, starting in the 5th or 6th grade. Child labor.
Child labor.
Against the law now, but you know, it's always been rooted there, and a good time, a good beginning, and I look back on it with fondness.
Yes, sir.
It was a good time, and we talk about it as the housing project, but it's more or less it was a community where everybody knew everybody, and everybody protected each other and did what we could for each other, and you know that was a good time and a good start for me.
What was the young Fred Jones back at Booker T. Washington? What were you into? What were you involved in? I know you walked to school, but what else? What else was you doing over there at Booker T?
I played sports.
Which ones?
Football, baseball, basketball. Okay. Ran a little track, and I was also in the band.
In the band too?
I played trombone in the band.
Wow.
So, and one of my fondest memories, and I think about this when I watched the parade, the classic parade in Orange Mound, was when we would march down we marched down Main Street, turn left to go on Beale Street. Mm-hmm. Well, when we got to Hanley Park, man, it was exciting because you had to go single file because there was so many people. Mm-hmm. We couldn't march. I was on the trombone, so we were on the front row. But once we got to Hanley Park, we had to mile single file to get through all the crowd. And when I watched the parade in Orange Mound, that was the kind of feeling I got, and I remember, you know, doing that as a kid and watching it happen now with the classic.
Yes. So tell me, when you graduated from Booker T, what were your eyes set on then? Was it immediately going to Memphis?
Well, until I got hurt next to the last football game of my senior year, my athletic, getting a scholarship to go to college was all but done. And in fact, I wanted to go to Tennessee State because in the 10th grade, we had played a game up at Burt High School in Clarksville, and the night before after the game, we stayed overnight at Tennessee State, and that was the weekend that they played Florida A&M. Mm-hmm. When Bob Hayes was, people talk about stars, but when he was the fastest man in the world, and he was on that team and to watch all that pageantry, and I watched Florida A&M band warm up, and it's pretty exciting. So when I get out of school, after my knee was torn up and I didn't rehab it properly, athletically I was done. So now I got to try to find my way. I didn't have a means to go to college, had a scholarship or anything like that, and so we kind of pieced it together. In fact, I had to take the test twice.
ACT?
I think it was the SAT.
SAT back then.
Yeah, but I had to take it twice.
Okay.
Because the first time I didn't make enough. The second time I made just enough to put both of them together, and they averaged it. And I happened to get the notification on the last day that I was able to go to then Memphis State University, and it was only $65 a semester.
$65 a semester.
$65. and we didn't have that, and I had to. And I was caddying at Memphis Country Club. I was working with Florist Flower Shop on Vance.
Wow.
But it happened, and my goal when I was going to college, I wanted to be a CPA.
Okay.
Only CPA I knew was Jesse Turner Sr., and I wanted to be he was one of the, if not the first black CPA in the Memphis, maybe in Tennessee, and I wanted to be a CPA.
So you like numbers?
Well, yes. and that comes from my grandmother.
Okay.
My grandmother's name was Carrie Jones, and she would give, I'm a junior, so I was a junior to her, and she would give me her money. It was $10, $15, whatever the number was. And we go to the store. At that time, you could buy the whole basket full of groceries for $10.
Okay.
And she would say, well, whatever the number was, she said, well, Junior, you take care. So I was always her, I would call her her banker. Mm-hmm. And, I always knew that I knew numbers. I had a good feel for it. And it just turned out to be a blessing because, I'm in the entertainment business for a long time, but I can't sing. I can't dance. I can't play fast sports. But when it comes to numbers, I have a God's gift for that.
Yes, sir.
It serves me well.
And that leads me to my next question, because I noticed, looking at your information, that you started putting together events very early in your life. What was your first event that you planned? Well,
it wasn't quite like that. I kind of backed into this whole situation, and I'll tell the short version of the story. I flunked out of college in '68. If you could have made anything lower than an F, I probably would have qualified for that.
Well, what's going on, Fred? Were you?
Well, it gets better. Thanks.
Okay.
And my plan was I was going to go work with my father. And my father was having none of that. You can't come to work with me. You're going to have to keep trying. And let me say one thing about my father at this point. Regardless of all the success that I've had in my life, I will never be as smart as my father. He's a man who never owned a car, never owned a house, never had on a suit. Probably the most money he worked on a job probably was maybe $50 a week. But he had wisdom it's unbelievable. And we developed a bond where I trusted him, and he believed in me, and kind of went from there. But when he said, "You can't go work with me, keep trying." So I went to Tri-State Bank. I got a job. They offered me a job. But, in 1968, I was a young, cocky. I can do better than this kind of routine. I think that's why you can't get too mad when you see these young superstars, acting out. The only difference is that they're talking about every time they act out, it costs them millions.
Yes, it does.
It doesn't go well. But that same day, I'm gonna shorten this story up, but that same day I was down on the pool room, Avalon Pool Room on Beale Street. So I stopped in and I'm talking all cocky and this, and I ain't gonna work for this, that, and the other. And the guy that worked in the pool room, I never knew his last name, was Lewis. And so he listened to me, and he was older. And I had a passion for listening to older people. The older they were, the closer I got to them. Don't care where they were always, gravitate to me, and they would say things to me, and I would listen and what have you. So he said to me, he said, "Fred," he said, "go and keep trying. And because you don't want to end up on Beale Street like me." That same day I walked, and ironically, I walked to the Union Planters Bank here, which was the headquarters from Avalon Pool Room over here. And when I was in this office, I was the first one that the gentleman that we were going to see when he came back, I was going to be the first one. Here again, I'm cocky. I ain't got time to sit. I ain't got no job. I don't flunked out of college.
You got time.
So I stayed, and when he came back after about 4.5 hours, I was the first one that he saw. Now, with people that listen to this, hope they understand this part. They hired me, a person who had flunked out of college, no degree, obviously, no experience. They hired me to work in the audit department at Union Planters Bank.
That's an important role.
It turned out to be a gift from God, because there was no way that nobody that we know today would have gotten hired with no experience, no anything. We're gonna hire you. And what happened kind of pressed it forward. I worked there, worked in the audit department. I mentioned I had this gift for numbers, so it was easy for me to learn how all these numbers. And I remember we could go do an audit, and this wall behind us, there would be money that would be stacked from the floor all the way up to the ceiling. First time I ever saw a $10,000 bill was that when I was working at the bank. But I got into the management program, and they decided that they needed someone to work out at the Bellevue branch at Union Planters. They were having some issues on that side of South Memphis, and they wanted me to go out there. Well, luckily for me, as fate would have it, Stax Records was doing their business at that branch. And I was this little, well, I wasn't too little, but I was this black guy sitting behind the desk. And everybody come in, everybody knew Fred. So that's why Isaac, David, Jim Stewart, Deanie Parker, the Soul Children. I knew Blackfoot from when we was in Lonzo Lock from the years ago, but all of them was doing business at that branch. If that had not happened, what you see today would have happened, because I would not have had the opportunity to meet people and move forward. So from me moving out to Stax Records, Union Planters, Stax Records, Soul Children, David Porter, my first full-time job was with Issac Hayes. But let me go back to the bank, because this is very significant for people. They hired me with no experience. When I was going, immediately I started going to school at night, catching the bus right over there when the bus was going down Main Street, all the way out to Memphis. And if I missed the connection coming home at night, I had to thumb a ride from University of Memphis or Memphis State to South Memphis. Never flunked again, never came close. I don't know what happened. The light came on and things were different.
Yes.
But what happened was that I had years later I needed 2 courses. They didn't have them at night, so I decided that I was going to take a leave of absence from the bank to take these 2 courses. So I went on, made A on them. One of them was accounting, which was at that point was pretty easy. I took the leave of absence. I come back, and they said, and everybody listening to this is how the conversation went. I went to see them, and they said, this guy called and said, what we gonna do with Fred Jones? Now, I got hired with no degree. I get a degree in finance, and most people when I say this, they can't believe that I'm a finance major.
I can believe it.
And an accountant minor. And they had a conversation right in front of me that said, what we gonna do with Fred Jones? Guy said, I don't know. He told me, he said, we will get back to you. All these many years later, this was 1971, I never heard from him.
After you got the degree?
I had the degree. And as fate would have it, that same day, Isaac offered me a job. And my job was to count money. And when Shaft was just coming out, and we left on a plane going to L.A., and the rest of the story just kind of took off from there. It kind of got peaks and valleys. But, I tried to say to people, you never know where all of this is going to end up. And when I'm telling the story, and I may be telling the long version today because I want people to really hear that what they see with the Southern Heritage Classic and all of these shows, the list of artists and all the things, the accomplishment I have, it wasn't always like that. So people believing in you and circumstances, and that's kind of the way it's been.
Wow. So that really goes to show you how important relationships are, the relationships that you have developed over the years. Some of the allies that have been on your team since day one.
Yeah, there's stories upon stories, and I don't want to drag all of this out, but somebody have to believe in your dream. When we talk about, going back to when I was working at the bank and the Soul Children was doing their business at Union Planters, and I asked Anita Lewis, I said, well, why why did you all trust me to go out on the road with them and count their money and do all of those things? Said, we just believed in you, and we felt that you were a good guy and you would take care of business. Going forward, I remember walking in the office in 1989. There was a gentleman that worked at the Commercial Appeal named Dave Swearingen. I walked in and I said, I got this idea that I want to do this event. And I took a sheet of paper off of his desk, blank, okay, and said, this is what I want to do. It wasn't even the Southern Heritage Classic at the time. It was just idea.
Okay.
And he said something that day, all of these many years later. He said, if you pull this off, Fred, you're going to have the biggest event in this town. Now, this is on one side of the coin. On the flip side of the coin, people were told me they never will be successful in Memphis. Mm-hmm. And we all get that a lot, you know.
Yes.
You're not going to be successful, but somebody has to believe in your dream, your idea. I had no idea about the Southern Heritage Classic being what it has become, or all of these shows, I mean, that I've been involved in all the years. You never would have thought that anything with that like that was possible.
Yes.
But I didn't set out to do that, but that's how things have worked out over the years.
So in 1990 was the first Southern Heritage Classic. And who were the two opponents in 1990?
Jackson State, Tennessee State.
So it originally was Jackson State, Tennessee State. So I'm sure you can clear up this, because I've been told that there were different HBCUs that participated within the Classic over the years.
Well, let me just get this. I didn't create Tennessee State playing Jackson State.
Okay.
That wasn't, so well, how do you get that together? It was always together, but one of the things that they were having a problem with was doing the event. Oh, let me get a little other background. They had been playing for years, and they had figured out that if they could play in Memphis, that was going to be their best chance of being successful. Mm. But what they had tried to do was try to come into Memphis, spend 2 weeks, and try to make it happen. Mm-hmm. Wasn't happening at all. And they approached me about, which was at a good time for me, because I was looking to do other things in Memphis. At one time, I only did about maybe 20% of my business was in Memphis. And I wanted to do something in Memphis. As I'm traveling around the country doing these events, I always would see, man, I want to do that in Memphis. I want to do that in Memphis. So when I finally looked at it, I said, if you let me do this, no, I would do it only if you allow me to do it the way I see it. And most of the time, people won't do that. I mean, they'll just say, okay, they know they needed it. It was not going to, well, I put it to you like this. They playing each other prior to 1990. The home team, the visiting team, if they played in Nashville or they played in Jackson, would get $20,000. And the home team would have to pay all the other bills and try to make it work. And it wasn't working. Over the course of the Classic, collectively, they have earned over $14 million from that beginning. But Dave Swearingen believed in this idea. And after about 3 or 4 months, we named it Southern Heritage Classic. And the only reason we did that, because I had another idea that I had worked on 5 years. It was going to be called the Southern Heritage Festival. And I had, if you go back and look at the first year, there was a left-handed blues player on a stoop, and that was our logo in the beginning, because we had used that for the festival idea, but I couldn't get it done. I would go to New Orleans every year to the Jazz Fest and study that and all of that, and it just didn't work. And so when it came time, what you gonna call it, this thing? And we said, we took the guy on the stoop, had Southern Heritage Classic Festival on it. We erased it off and put Southern Heritage Classic, and here we go. That's where we are right now. So somebody have to really believe in it in order for things for you to be successful. As much credit as we all get for whatever things are successful, there's somebody had to believe in that dream, that idea. And fortunately for me, and very fortunate to me, that Dave Swearingen was the person that I ended up talking to, because this brochure, the idea from this brochure came from Dave. When we first started the classic, we would type all of this out, because none of this, I mean, I didn't have none of editors to work with. I mean, and so we would take sheets of paper and put the idea of this on the page. We would staple it, fold it. We all be sitting, people would come in, volunteer to sit in the floor and staple these together, and we go take it to the post office and whatever. And, now we can do it in, the fact, this brochure, where it's done now, they just take it and put it up on the satellite, and then the satellite sends it down to the printer.
Yes.
And the printer, it prints it. They put it in the box, and FedEx picks it up and delivers it. I mean, that's how that works, but it wasn't always like that.
Yes, so 1990 kicked it off, and did you set the trends with the classic football games? Because in other cities, they have their big traditions. But you set it off in Memphis.
Yes. I mean, that was the whole idea. At one time, there would be buses after buses going to the Bayou Classic.
Bayou
Classic. Every year. I mean, I'm going to say this, for hundreds of people going to the Bayou Classic every year, leaving Memphis. And that was part of the struggle in the beginning, because people could not envision this event that they've gone to New Orleans or gone to Birmingham or gone to Atlanta, what have you, that they could do it in Memphis. So, but they were going to the events. But quickly, classics were really started by the black coaches of the HBCUs as a way to be out front, where they can get more publicity, more people involved, what have you. And whether it was in Florida, whether it's in Birmingham, or Montgomery, Alabama, Bayou Classic, State Fair Classic in Dallas, Circle City Classic in New Orleans, and Indianapolis. They were a way for not only to make more money, but then there's a place where they could get all the alumni together and get some publicity, because most of the historically black schools are in rural areas, and so then people didn't know them as well. So that's why the classics were a big deal, and that's why Tennessee State and Jackson State wanted to be in Memphis, because it's going back to the migration, the black migration out of Mississippi. B.B. King was trying to get to Memphis, or get to West Memphis. All the blues singers that lived in Clarksdale and what have you. They were trying to get to Memphis, and then from Memphis they went to Chicago and what happened. But Memphis was the spot. So for this game, this event, these two schools, they only 200 miles away from Memphis. So it's not a big cost involved. And for us, for people, I don't travel that much anymore, but when you travel, the cost of a hotel room in Memphis is far less than is the hotel in New Orleans or Atlanta or what have you. So the cost of doing business in Memphis and the notoriety that they would get from playing was far greater than playing in their hometown.
Yes. Let's talk about and compare the success of Classic in 1990 versus 2022. That first year in 1990, when you had the first Classic, what did the attendance look like back then?
I think the attendance was like 39,000.
That's good. For a first year event?
Yeah, but it was a lot of everything with it starting out. Mm-hmm. And the one thing, I remember a lot of things about it, but two things, that night, it started to rain. Mm. And everybody, when it starts raining, everybody kind of runs, and oh my God, nobody stopped walking. I mean, it was mist and rain, and which is probably the worst. And everybody just kept walking because, they wanted this to work. And I remember when Tri-State Bank was right down here on the corner, that Monday morning I was at the bank, and this lady walked up to me and from behind and hugged me, and with tears in her eyes. She said, "You made me feel so good on Saturday." Mm. You knew then what this could become, and she was crying. Said, "Man, I just had a good time," and she knew, and I think the community knew what the tough time that we were trying to have, and they wanted it to work. Mm-hmm. So again, it's just when you look back on it, there were a lot of things that first year, but the main thing was that we were able to pull it off. Yeah. In spite of all the naysayers and I started the Classic basically with no sponsors.
No sponsors.
Coca-Cola gave me money 2 weeks before the event. And when I tell people this, I was doing a tour called Seagram's Gins, A Taste of the Blues, with B.B. King, Bobby Bland, Albert King, Albert Collins, Charlie Musselwhite, just to name a few blues. I mean, it was a sensational tour. They are the reasons why we have the Southern Heritage Classic today. Because if that tour had not been successful, there was nobody willing to finance or give us money to do this. And I just took that, my family sacrificed over all that time while I was, as they always say, robbing Peter to pay Paul, Yeah. It never would have happened without that.
Yes. Wow. So let's talk about this, Fred, because a lot has changed from just last year to this year. I want to know, where were you? What were you doing? And what was your reaction when you first heard that JSU may be pulling out the Classic? Can we get the 411 on this?
I want to be very candid and very straightforward with any of these questions that you asked me. But my first reaction, I knew exactly where I was. It's almost like I was kind of going back to Issac Hayes, and when people talk about the Academy Award. I knew exactly where I was when they said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Oscar goes to Issac Hayes." And I remember looking at my phone, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I read it, and I called my lawyer, and I said, "Are you reading the same thing I'm reading?"
You got an email or a text?
That was the email.
Okay.
And I said, "Are you looking at what I'm looking at?" Because as soon as I read it, I sent it to him. And you see, yeah, I was just, taken back by it all. Because people, a lot of conversation and about it, there was no discussion about it prior to me receiving that letter. It was just, you just stunned. But having been conditioned to make adjustments and whatever over the years with a lot of things that we had to deal with along the way with the classic. When I got over my initial shock, you had to sort your way, figure out what we're going to do with it. But my initial was, I was just in shock. I couldn't believe and I'll just say this today. I still don't believe it, because people don't really realize, and I got this from, I did national tours for several years with the Isley Brothers. And O'Kelly Isley was the older brother, and he was, to be around them and watch how that played out, they would go back into these creative people. They were always really talented. And whatever Kelly said, that was what they ended up doing. So Kelly told me one time, he said, people do not realize how emotional all of this is. You putting everything into it, your heart and soul, your resources and everything. And when it doesn't go well, emotionally, you just taken back. It's like, it wasn't like, when I read it, it was like, oh, well. It was like, oh, my God.
What did it say?
Can't tell you.
Was it like an email from Deion Sanders?
No.
No. But you knew what they were trying to say.
Well, no, they didn't try to say it. If you go back and read the documents, it was very clear.
Okay.
And you're trying to sort through all of this, and I'm not going to, take this time to bash or talk bad about anybody. Jackson State played in the Classic for 29 years.
Yes.
Okay. Dion was with Jackson State for the Classic for 2 years, and things went well. That's unfortunate. I think there's a lesson learned here that when you have a problem, if you find a way to kind of talk it out or talk about it, sit down, it cannot be so bad that you can't talk about it. And that's one of the things that we see going on right now. When there's a confrontation, they just take it to extreme. I remember when I was talking to one of the kids, I think I was at junior court, or maybe it might have been at Porter Junior High, not Porter Junior High, but over on Orleans and Vance. But I remember telling the young kid, I said, when you have a confrontation, you just like you nose to nose like this. If either one of y'all decided, or both, just one, to take one step back, ends up being like this, you're not nose to nose anymore. It gives you a chance to think about it. And I think that, if I'd had a chance and not to go any further with this, that if I had a chance to talk about it. Because one of my things that I learned from my father is that you try to talk to people and you try to work things out. And one of the things that with the classic and what has happened, it's not about just Fred Jones. This community was like, okay, what are we gonna do? Does that mean, what's gonna change? Are we gonna do the classic? I mean, it was, and I had to be very careful how I answered people.
Yes.
Fred, what we gonna do? What we gonna do? And I said, I couldn't ever say I didn't know. I had to say, I'm working on it. I worked on it. Sometimes I just kind of stretched the truth a little bit. I said, I'm working on it this morning. Okay, man, I know you're going to work it out. But again, the lesson learned from that is that we need to try to just at least talk about it.
Yeah.
Nothing is, I remember a 9/11. I remember right down here on Union when WDIA and was right up just down the street. I get a call. I'm going up to see Bobby O.J. I get a call. The call said, "Have you heard about the plane hit the building?" At that time, I hadn't heard it. Oh, another plane that's hit another building. I'm standing right outside on Union. Okay. And then we went up and Bobby and I started talking about the classic this weekend, thing that we had over the years had done many times. And while we were sitting there, the plane hit the Pentagon. Okay, so it was like, okay, what you gonna do? The whole world was turned upside down, and what's gonna happen with the classic this weekend, and we had no idea, and we had to figure it out. And what we ended up doing was moving the game to Thanksgiving weekend, but there are a lot of things that went into how you're gonna handle this, and you had to just kind of keep your wits and try to figure it out. And everybody was affected.
Yes. Businesses in Memphis.
The whole world was affected by what's happening.
Yeah.
Try to figure that out, and we were able to figure it out.
Yes. Well, change is good.
You know what? I hear people say that.
I didn't know if you agree with me or not.
I've heard people say that until you have to deal with it. See, it's a different world when you're sitting over there and you over here, or like you've heard this before about the head coach and the assistant coach, where the head coach is sitting here and the assistant coach is sitting there. When the assistant coach moves over here to be the head coach, it's a different dynamic. It's a different world. And when it's changed. Okay, what are you going to do? When it changes, it doesn't automatically program itself to go to whatever it is that you need for it to go to. So you got to figure all of this out. And sometimes when people say that, it's hard to get our kids or grandkids or great-grandkids or friends, something happened and you have to make a change, how difficult it is. And you hear people say this all the time. Well, I used to do this. Okay, we did it this way. Well, there's change in effect, and sometimes people don't accept changes.
True.
And it's taken us this year probably 4 to 5 months for people to just accept the fact that there was going to be a change. That there's change. They're looking at, I've been trying to figure out what they were really looking at. So
I understand what you're saying because I was telling a gentleman earlier this morning that was here that I was going to have a live podcast with you. You should come and sit down and listen. And he was like, we still having a classic. You get that a lot?
I get it. With me, if I get it one time a day.
One time a day.
If I get it one time, I go into a whole nother energy level because I haven't completely done my job. Mm-hmm. Okay? If one person, this. I got a story for everything. This happens on the same Saturday.
I love your stories.
So I'm in Cossitt Corner. Somebody said, well, who's playing? I said, University of Arkansas, UAPB, and Tennessee State. Really? I said, yeah. I go to the post office down on B.B. King. Somebody stopped me and said, are you having the classic this year? And that's when I knew that the change wasn't really accepted. I want you to think about this. When we announced the fact that UAPB was playing in this game, and we sent the information out, Jay is here, at 10:35 in the morning. From that moment to the next news cycle on the next morning, we were at the top of the news.
Trending.
On every station in this town and in this area. Okay? So what I'm saying is that from the very beginning, when it was official that they were coming, it became a big news item. But people didn't accept initially that change. And they're saying that, it's out there for them to know. It's not like, that you told a few people and you hope the other people don't know, but it's all over the place and all on social media and all everything, and it was kind of frustrating, but I know what we have done, but people weren't accepting the change initially.
I get it too, because it's been going on for 33 years. It's embedded in our community. Like, we always looking for the classic weekend, and the two opponents have always been the same, right?
Well, except for 1991 and 1993. Other than that, it's always been Tennessee State and Jackson State.
Who was it in 92 and 93?
91, it was Mississippi Valley and Tennessee State, and 93 it was Grambling and Tennessee
Grambling.
State. Right.
Okay. So now this year, for the 34th celebration, we have UAPB. How was UAPB selected? And I see that they are on a 2-year contract. And what does the classic look like after those 2 years?
Well, to be straightforward, I don't know. My whole team, all our energy and all our efforts is put into 2023. Okay? Because one thing I learned from Dave, the Dave Swearingen I mentioned earlier, was that each year is different. I can go to every year and I can tell you something different that happened with this same event. Every year, something up. So our focus is to present as best we can this year. I'm not focused on anything, and people saying, well, how many people are you gonna have? I said, well, I check with me at the fourth quarter on September the 9th, and I can tell you. But before then, it's like a jigsaw puzzle on this table. And on this table, you have pieces of the puzzle that says Southern Heritage Classic. You got to put all these pieces together to get what it finally looks like. And you all over the place doing that. So you can't worry about what happens next year, what happens in the future. all of that will take care of itself. And I've learned from my experiences that sometimes the decision is made for you.
Like you said, every year it's something different with the event. And, this year TSU will be playing UAPB. What are you most looking forward to with this classic for 2023?
I think the most important thing that I'm looking for is that we continue to come together. All the things that we've done over the years has not stopped us as a community from coming together.
Yeah.
That's what you want to see happen more so than anything else. All the back stuff and all the work that goes behind it, but that's just part of it. I don't have sleepless nights because I don't take it to bed with me. I just, when I shut down, it's shut down, but as soon as I wake up, I'm ready going back at it. So
I understand.
But I'm just looking for the people to have what they always had. And you said something earlier about change. There's only one change with the Southern Heritage Classic this year. One. UAPB has taken over Jackson State's spot.
Yeah.
Everything else is the same. There's a concert, there's a golf tournament, there's a parade, there's fashion show, there's a coach's luncheon, Battle of the Bands in Whitehaven High School, the tailgate,
the lovely tailgate.
headboard tailgate.
The tradition continues.
Yes, and that's why when they talk about the change, as if the whole dynamics of the event got turned up on its head. Yes, it's like doing a show. You got to have a headliner. And Jackson State is a headliner, and I've said this, I'll probably say it publicly now. Jackson State football is the number one drawing football team in America. Number one. Okay? And even before Dion got there. I mean, that's the facts. So, you don't, it's like any business, if you lose your number one customer, it doesn't mean that you're going out of business. You just got to make adjustments. And we've had to make these adjustments on the fly. So we don't know how it's going to turn out, but I can safely say here today that this community is going to be pleasantly surprised. We have Keith Jackson is going to be the speaker at the luncheon we just announced this week. People know exactly who he is. I mean, he's a Super Bowl champion, lives in Little Rock, and he was coming to the Classic in large part because of UAPB, so we get a chance to hear from him. He's a great speaker and got an amazing story and of what he's been able to accomplish with his life coming from Little Rock, Arkansas.
You know what? I'm excited to see the energy that UAPB brings to this year's Classic, because I see a lot of people that are alum of there, and they're doing a lot of things leading up to this Classic. So
it's called the UAPB 901 Takeover.
Yes. And it looks exciting, right?
Yeah, well, that's why sometimes, the child in you come out when you're working on something. I was leaving home a couple of days ago, and I live near downtown, so I was going up Crump, back out east on Crump, and I look up, and there's a UAPB billboard.
Okay.
And I'm going, oh,
Boom.
you know. Then I found out there's 7 more, and there's a lot of energy, and a lot of people really want to showcase the school. And when you talk to people, you find out there are a lot of family members that have gone to that school. I mean, and I found out later that they're Memphis, Shelby County. It's one of the largest alumni chapters that they have in the country.
I was about to ask you that.
Yeah, that was prior to us them getting in. So now you have a chance to showcase it, and that's what they are doing. And again, I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yes.
And all we need is what I call the X factor to cooperate, and the X factor is the weather.
Yeah.
You know, and so if the weather is a nice day like today, sun shining, it doesn't get too hot for a tailgate.
Oh, we gonna party at the tailgate regardless.
The rain kind of slows things around, but you know, if it's a nice sunny day, it makes for a great day.
You know what? I have been going to Southern Heritage Classic since I first entered LaMorne College in fall of 1997. And that was my introduction to Southern Heritage Classic. And I have been going ever since. And I don't plan on changing it. And Mr. Jones Jr., I just pray that, you know, this change that you're going through right now, it's going to be a blessing in disguise, I think. I think everything is going to work out like it's supposed to.
We started the Classic, you know, there was no social media.
None.
I mean, this brochure, the technology, if you can print this brochure, put your chip in the computer, not only do they print it, they can mail it to you and send it and sort it and all that, and you never touch it. There's new technology, new bells and whistles to work with. And when you got social media from TikTok to Facebook to Instagram to LinkedIn, all of those things are connecting people. And when you go on, especially on Facebook, and you see chapters of UAPB just from everywhere showing up, that's the kind of energy that you're looking for.
Well, Fred Jones Jr., I want to thank you for coming on the Verbally Effective podcast right here live at the historic Cossitt Library. Your journey is truly amazing. We are looking forward to this 34th edition, and there's going to be plenty more. And I want to know if you have any final words for the Verbally Effective audience today.
Just enjoy yourself and be happy that we have a chance to, you know, each year to change the perception. I mean, the perception of Memphis not only here us locally, and I say us because we're all in it together. All this people nationally think Memphis is, you know, it's going down the river, you know, because all the things that are happening in our community. And we got a chance to, just for the week of the Classic, to really show ourselves that we can be a lot different than what's been going on, you know, that we can enjoy ourselves, enjoy our families, you know, and thanks to these schools and what they have represented for people for more than 100 years, what it meant, and just enjoy it. I mean, and just to get together and the smiles and what have you that we have, and in closing, I just want to say thank you. I could not have done any of this if the people in this community have not supported me for all of these years. And for that, I said thank you.
Thank you so much. You're such a beacon in the Memphis community. And if you've never gotten your flowers, we're giving you your flowers today, Mr. Fred Jones Jr., founder of the Southern Heritage Classic. We're going to be celebrating this year for the 34th edition, TSU versus UAPB, and it's just going to be just as fabulous as ever. Thank you so much, Fred.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.